Hello and welcome. It's great to see you all start joining on this beautiful Thursday. I'll give you a minute while we wait for everyone to get settled in and connected. And in the meantime, I'm going to launch our first poll. I'm curious to see what's bringing you to today's webinar, especially if this is, your first one. Is it educational? Are you in the beginning stages of your third-party risk program, perhaps a current prevalent customer? Maybe you have no idea where you are, let me know. And then let's kick things off with some introductions. My name is Melissa. I work here at Prevalent in business development. And today we are joined by a returning guest, Tom Garrubba, Director of Third-Party Risk Management Services at Echelon Risk Cyber. Welcome back, Tom.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back with everybody here.
Good.
Prevalent's a great partner, so it's always great to be able to, it's always fun. I always try to keep these things fun.
Good. I'm glad you're back. Didn't scare you away yet. And then as you see, we have Scott here, Scott Lang, our very own VP of Product Marketing. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Melissa, how are you?
Really good. We got Tom back. So today we get to discuss the top TPRM compliance mistakes practitioners make in their programs. As a little bit of housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded, so you will get this along with the slideshow in your inbox later today. Lastly, you're all muted, so use the Q&A box for those questions that will chip away at the end of the webinar. And without further ado, I will let Tom get started. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Hey, everybody, again, welcome. Go to the first slide. I don't have to read all this. A little bit about me. Let me just tell you that I've been in the business for 20 plus years in all aspects of security and privacy and audit and compliance and on and on and on and on and on. You can certainly go take a look at what I do from a background here. But the one thing that I want to share with you is when I was running my program and I designed my program at a Fortune 8 healthcare company at the time, now it's Fortune 3 or 4, was I always designed it and built it with the mindset of what would auditors or examiners want to look at? What would they poke me on? So I wanted to be able to share with you some of the things that I have heard, complaints or arguments, or just in conversations, either when I'm talking to people who are running their programs or hearing from regulators. I have over the years, many opportunities sit in front of various regulators, financial, healthcare, here in the States, here across the pond in the UK. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to share some of these, if I could drop a shameless plug, tidbits here. This is going to be a big, massive tidbit on 5 things with respect to what we're talking about and how to make sure you can stay in compliance with your third-party risk program. So I'm actually going to do this 5 through 1. So I'll start with what I think is the most important thing at the as we start getting to the tail end. So let's start with number 5, lack of documentation. As an ex-auditor, you probably have seen this coming, okay? Documentation is often outdated and obsolete, and it's not purely reflective on what you need to do from a third-party risk perspective with respect to regulations or guidance. We just had 2 days ago, the FDIC, the OCC, and it was 3 out of the 5 of the FFIEC came together and released new guidance on third-party risk management. And it's a really good document, and it's something that you really need to look up on and see how this is going to change as you're doing third-party risk, obviously through the risk lens. While you're making these adjustments, it's very important that you take a look at your documentation and make sure that those regulations now reflect what you need to do on your third-party assessments or monitoring or other components. Another thing I see too, can't tell you how many times I've talked to people or looked at documentation and their team didn't even review it. Can't tell you from an audit perspective, we don't do this. Oh my gosh, this thing was written 4 years ago. We've changed this at least 2 or 3 times over the last 4 years. So it ties into the outdated and obsolescence, but get your team to review it. Make sure that everybody on the team understands what the playbook is. Because as an auditor, as an ex-auditor, or if you're talking to regulators, this is what they're going to want to see. This is what they want to go and take a look at, because as you see the next bullet item here, techniques and tools are used, but they're not documented for ease of auditability. The key driver I want you to be able to do is focus on what you need to do through that devil's advocate mindset of making it easy for the regulator or for an auditor to come in and see what you are doing. And it starts with the documentation. I've seen things such as appendices that they've made that are not attached to the existing process. Oh, we got that document somewhere. Let me get back to you. Or let me go find that file and I'll send it to you. Okay. These are the things you need to have at the ready. Okay. When you're slowing down the audit, trust me when I tell you this, it does put something in the back of the auditor or the regulator's mind going, do they truly not have this, or are they making this stuff up as they go? Okay. It's kind of like when you had happen to do assessments and you ask somebody on a Tuesday, hey, can you get me can I see this policy? Oh yeah, I'll have it to you by Friday. Why do you got to write it? You know, have that mindset. This is what regulators and auditors are looking for. Other things, have a separate playbook. Okay. You need to have a separate playbook, but oftentimes these separate playbooks have no evidence of ownership or sign off. Well, this is what so-and-so does, and we use their playbook. Who owns the playbook? Who reviews this and signs off on it, at least on an annual basis? And lastly, having documentation that the old adage applies, if you have a subject matter expert in your team that knows how to do a specific thing, maybe you pull them in to do your continuous monitoring and that person's solely responsible, or maybe you have somebody that's doing pen testing for critical vendors and they get hit by a bus, the proverbial hit by the bus situation. Can somebody pick up that documentation and run with it? In many cases, that documentation doesn't exist. So it's very important to adhere from a documentation perspective. So let's move on to number 4. Not adhering to corporate policies or standards. This is one that's really overlooked as well. People that are able to tie in standards or regulations or other type of guidance into their programs are so attuned to looking at it from outside. Hey, there was an update to NIST. There was an update to COVID. There was an update to ISO or GDPR or something like that. They start putting that in, but they forget to take a look at their own organization's policies and standards. So have that understanding of you must make sure that your program is in alignment with corporate and organization policies. And here's some great examples. Background checks. If you have a stated component within your company that somebody has to go through a background check, why are you turning over data to a vendor, perhaps even a critical vendor, and they don't do any background checks? Don't forget, those vendors are an extension of your organization and entity. So if they're going to be in possession of data, if they're going to be doing certain key critical processes, you want them to be in full alignment with your organization. And that includes something as simple as background checks. What about connectivity standards? I got a call once from a large IT vendor that we had a great relationship with. And he said, hey, Tom, I just want to give you a heads up. We're not going to be able to be in alignment with the new connectivity standards to your network. I'm like, oh, okay. What are you talking about? And he said, Tom, we're not allowed to VPN into the network anymore. We have to be heart-to-heart B2B connectivity. I went, why is this the first time I'm hearing about this? So I got off the phone and I called the CISO and I explained the situation to him, and you can hear him go, hold on, I'm going to conference so-and-so in. So he conferences in the network security director and says, I got Tom Garrubba on the line here. How come he wasn't made aware of this? And he's going, oh my God, I never shared with you guys our new connectivity standards. So why is this important to me from a third-party risk perspective? Because I just signed off over the last 2 months, upwards of 20, maybe even 30 assessments that we asked them questions with respect to, are you connecting to the network? And if it was yes, and there was a VPN connectivity, we never asked them, how are you doing with respect to the migration that is now the corporate standard of going to business connectivity? Do we need to loop you in more with people to make sure that you're going to be able to hit those deadlines and those timeframes? So it's important that you have the relationship with organizations such as IT, with human resources on background checks, and with other entities, so they can fill you in on any adjustments you need to make within your question set that you're going to be asking your vendors. Another one, a no-go zone. Back where I was, it was an unwritten rule. And you know what they say about it, unwritten rules. Not everybody is aware of the unwritten rule. But we actually had an unwritten rule that no data, personally identifiable information at all, was to go over to China. We found out through a conversation with a business unit, critical business unit, that they were talking to a particular vendor, and they happened to find out that work that was supposed to be done in Gurgaon was actually moved over into Shanghai. And the vendor did it because it was a cost savings for them to be able to shift that. So what spelled out of that? Now I'm working with the CISO, and we're working hand in hand to make sure that the vendor gets that data placed back over into Gurgaon where it was supposed to be being processed in. So have an understanding that if you have no-go zones, making sure that you're tying that into your policies and asking those right questions. Other things such as non-approved corporate design contracts. A lot of business units like the autonomy. I want to be able to deal with who I want to deal with. That's fine. However, are you using corporate design contracts by your legal department, by your procurement office, that specifically uses the weight of the parent company behind you? Back in my days in auditing, this was pretty much across the board with many, many business units in the banking field, at least in the one particular bank I was with, where organizations were able to have contracts strictly catered to them, and they had the ability to enter into agreements where they could have probably had more cost savings tied into if they used a corporate contract. The other thing too is there was other loopholes or other costs and rates in there that I looked at and went, oh my God, you got to be kidding. This is what they're going to charge you for off-hour support. Are you okay with this? And when you have a conversation with them, a lot of times they'll say, well, the attorney said that they were fine with it because they assume you're fine with paying that kind of exorbitant fee. If you have the Office of the Procurement and Sourcing Group behind you, or the corporate legal department from that angle even, they should be able to say, no, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't have to be doing this. Oh, by the way, there are some other security components that we need to add into this, such as a data privacy and security addendum, DPSA, okay? Making sure that you have that kind of document affixed to the contract. And lastly, completely bypassing the TPRM process. Can't tell you how many times I've run across organizations go, yeah, I know there's a policy that says, you have to do a vendor assessment, but do they really, because this is all they're doing. I once had an organization where their legal counsel reached out to me and said, hey, Tom, I know we have to run, our vendors through you, but we're just hiring a marketing firm to come in here and help us place retail stores. We don't really have to, they're just, they're just using time-tested marketing techniques to figure out where the stores are being placed. And I'm sitting there going, it's not passing the smell test here. My spider sense was tingling since the Spider-Man movie's out. Not that I would know that, my kids do. But anyway, I said, why don't you set up a call? Let's have this call with the vendor. And that's what we did. We had a call with the vendor. And mind you, I have the legal counsel representing the business unit. I have the vendor. And I asked them, I said, so tell me a little bit about how you're going to be placing these stores. And they said, well, yeah, we're using time-tested marketing and, and where to place the stores, et cetera. And I said, well, what are you basing that off of? Are you getting any information from us, particularly any personally identifiable information? And the vendor said, well, of course. That way we could see what stores, where the populace has been populating certain stores. And we can say, hey, look, we had 10, 15,000 people from this geographic location using this store. Maybe we need to put a store there. And it was based off of, wait for it, prescription-based data, PHI. So it's like, thank you very much for playing. We'll start the assessment this Monday. That's why you need to make sure you're asking the right questions and making sure you're holding your business units and those entities to account with respect to being in alignment with corporate policies and standards of making sure they go through your vendor assessment program. Okay. Was a little bit verbose there, but I really wanted to drive home how you can lose touch very easily by focusing on all the things that are moving outside of the walls of your organization. But don't forget to take a look at what's going on from a corporate policy and standard. Let's move on to number 3, not identifying and keeping meaningful metrics. You can't manage what you don't monitor. That certainly applies here. Take an honest look at your existing metrics. Are they accurately reporting on the business and vendor risks? It's senseless to keep a metric that no one's going to look at, that no one's going to reference, and has no meaning either to the corporate suite or to the actual business units. So you want to, and obviously we're talking here from a vendor risk perspective. Okay, again, maybe they're geopolitical risks, maybe they're security risks. You can go through the whole slew that might be in your risk inventory. So you want to make sure you're able to target metrics that can hone in on those risks. You want to make sure you provide your management with quality data and information, and make those adjustments to your program when you can. It's very critical that you're able to do that. Okay. If you're using a GRC platform, you may have to play with it to make sure you're getting the results that you want. You may have to work with some other business analysts to make sure that the data you're getting is meaningful and you're able to interpret it accurately. Okay. So when you have to make a presentation to your higher ups, or even present meaningful information to your CISO, to your chief privacy officer, to your chief compliance officer, and they need to take this to the board, they understand what you've captured. Make sure it's representative of your true assessment environment. So what I'm talking about here is, this is more from a management perspective. I'm a big fan of stage gate monitoring. Okay. How many assessments were assigned to each of my individual staff? Where are they in the opening meeting? Where are they in the actual due diligence process? Where are they in getting documentation back? Where are they with respect to interviewing the subject matter experts at the vendor or even at the business unit? Where are they in the reporting? Where are they with respect to handing it over to me, where now the report is in my hands? Sometimes you got to manage the manager. Can't tell you how many times when I've had a weekly call with my staff and I'm sitting there going, hey, this is sitting in your report queue. What happened? Tom, I sent it to you last Friday. And you're going, oh my God, I'll get to it today, right after this meeting. It happens. Sometimes your team has to manage you. So that's a metric that I'm held accountable for. Okay. So you want to make sure you have a true understanding of the metrics and what's being kept for your program. You want to accurately report to management, the business units and stakeholders risks that they care about. Okay. We're seeing a bunch of, maybe there's typhoons that have been hovering over the Indian Ocean, and this can cause some concern because we have critical processing being done in India or in Indonesia or in Vietnam, any of these other places there. Is this something of a concern? This is the value add, that last bullet where you're able to then provide information to your business units. Here's another bit of value we brought, being in the healthcare industry. For those of you that happen to be, for instance, healthcare providers, how many of you have went to the OCR's Wall of Shame? I had one of my staff where their sole job for at least an hour was to go and take a look at the Wall of Shame and see what vendors or covered entities, well, let's use the HIPAA talk, covered entities, service providers, insurance providers might have had to report a breach. In the eyes of the OCR, a breach is over 500 records. We would then run that against our inventory, our vendor inventory. And if we found that there were certain vendors that were on that OCR list, we had contact with the business units and said, hey, we found this. You, as the business unit leader, should contact the vendor and get written verification as to whether or not that breach data affects your business unit. Luckily, when we've done that, the business units all came back and said, thank you so much. We didn't know about this. We reached out to them, and here's the documentation saying it didn't affect, it wasn't us, it was some other client of theirs. That's the value you bring back to your stakeholders. Okay. Try cooking with gas here. Maybe I should slow down a little bit more, tell more stories. But let's move on to the second one. not having or matching up a third-party inventory or registry. I still am shocked at being in this industry for so long, for almost a dozen years, and organizations, both mature, medium-sized, and obviously, smaller organizations that still don't have a third-party inventory, or what they call in the UK and in Europe, a vendor registry. You must be able to determine who has ownership of or possesses and maintains the organization's vendor inventory or the book of record. Is it you? Is it sourcing and procurement? You should have a determination as to who is responsible for managing that. This is very important. A lot of organizations that I mentioned don't have this. Guess what? The regulators are honing in on this, particularly for my friends across the pond. This is something that both the European Banking Authority, the Financial Conduct Authority are really zooming in on. So if you're over in that part of the world, please make sure you follow all of the guidance over there with respect to registering your vendors with the regulators, because that's a must on the EBA side of the house. Here in the US, also, you need to be able to make sure you can maintain that. So you might sit there and say, well, we have an inventory and procurement has an inventory. That's fine. You have to make sure you sync up. This was actually a low risk finding that I got, and I'll explain. As I mentioned to you before, when I crafted my program, I really did it through the lens of playing devil's advocate. And when I had a conversation with the chief auditor and he said, I'm going to come and audit you. I said, please, I want you to. You should. Why aren't you? Look how critical we are to the organization. And they came in and they took a look at us, and I had one low risk item. So I feel bad if they used to joke around and say, oh, you get paid by the finding. Well, this guy didn't make too much then. Low risk finding was, though we had, according to our policy, according to our charter, we used a GRC platform, and was our vendor book of record. However, procurement had their own book of record. They were not on our same platform. They had their others. So why is this important? In many big organizations, business units can bypass procurement. When you're in a big Fortune 10, Fortune 100 company, a lot of times they'll sit there and go, you only need to go to procurement and sourcing if it's at a 20,000 annual spend, or 50,000 annual spend. You're going to capitalize on it. Okay. Then it has to go through procurement and sourcing and all that stuff. But as a business unit, you're permitted to do this. If you can slap this on your Amex card or however you want to do this, then you don't have to go through procurement and sourcing. So organizations look for that loop to see if they can bypass procurement and sourcing. And when they do that, procurement and sourcing doesn't necessarily have a record. So this is why it's important to sync up with sourcing and with procurement. So you want to make sure too, as you're going through this inventory, also have conversations with the business units, have conversations with legal, okay? Make sure that everybody's singing from the same hymn. I can't tell you how many times, if I'm looking for a contract, the business unit would say, oh, I have one here, but I only got the red line. Go talk to legal. Legal will sit there and say, this is the last thing that I have. The business unit should have a copy of it. You might want to check with procurement and sourcing. Procurement and sourcing will come back and go, how much was that contract for? 25,000. They didn't need to come here, so we don't have a record of it. You're just going, I can't believe we're going through this. So you want to make sure you have a way of syncing up your inventory so everybody knows. And sometimes this says, okay, hey, procurement and sourcing, I know you don't have this. However, you might want to put this into the vendor pool for larger projects, because you might have a vendor today that's only going to spend 25,000, but next year there might be a project that they're getting paid 100,000 or $1 million or 10 million. So this is a good time to get that lined up now with procurement and sourcing. So it's very important to sync that up. The last thing you really want to do is have to reach out to accounts payable. It's obviously the easiest way to go, but it's very, very time consuming. To get any type of file from accounts payable, it's going to be massive. Break it up by cost code. And you might see 20 entries just alone for IBM for a single cost code. IBM, IBM Ltd, International Business Machines, IBM India, IBM USA, on and on and on, based on certain projects or based on certain scopes, based on business entities that they have. And you're sitting there going, okay, it's IBM. So make sure you have an understanding of what you're looking at. So I think that's also something very, very important, that if you need to as a last resort, again, last resort, you can go to accounts payable. All right, here's the number one. Looks like I'm going to be a little early here, but I'm sure we're going to have some questions. But here's another one. Organizations are always in reactive mode. It's the nature of the beast. What I would like you to do is move from reactive mode and start switching to a more proactive mode. It's really going to help the other four components that I just talked about in this entire presentation here, okay? By being in proactive mode, stepping back, whether it's an hour a week, 2 hours a week, 2 hours a month, whatever it is, take a look and say, what adjustments do I need to make where I'm not reacting, where I can be proactive, and if somebody needs it, I go, I got it right here. Let me send you that file. Let me reach out to this person. I know who's responsible for that. When you switch from a reactive footing to a proactive footing, you're going to see smoothness and fluidity in your daily operations. And when we're talking about fluid, is you're able to adjust like fluid. The military has a terminology where they say being flexible is being too rigid. So you need to be fluid. You need to be able to turn on a dime and move rapidly. You want to make sure you update documentation as your changes are made. I'll give you a great example. When I was running the program and PCI 3.1.2 came out, or whichever one it was, which is now focusing at that point in time on making sure that all of your credit card data was on its own separate network. That went into effect, if I recall correctly, into October of that calendar year. So what did that mean? I briefed my organization and I said, we're in August, because we've always made a constant review in August of looking at everything, our playbooks. We revised our standards. We revised our documentation standards. We reviewed the policies, what needed to be changed. And we said, coming in October, as of October 1st, this is going to be a new check for us, for any organization that's going to be in possession of PCI data. So making those changes made. Having open discussions with your stakeholders. This is a key point. Give me 1 second. When I'm talking about open discussions, the running gag that we had in my group was, I'm based in Pittsburgh. I had people in Scottsdale, Arizona. I had people in Rhode Island. When I would go to Rhode Island or I'd go to Scottsdale, the running joke was, oh, Tom just checked in and now he's gone. I think he's going to come back for lunch. I don't know. But he said he's going to take us out to dinner later. And I said, hey guys, I don't need to talk to you. I don't need to see you. I'm here to talk to the business units. Because now I'm sitting down with them saying, hey guys, what's going on? What do you have coming up? What should I be made aware of? This is incredibly important to do before you start getting into travel season. You know, I really made a run of this, particularly in the February, March timeframes, as well as the September, October timeframes. And if you're wondering why those, for two reasons. One, February, March, let's start lining things up. What projects do you have coming up? How can we help you? Let's get these in the queue now, because I know I got so-and-so who's going on a 2-week cruise. I got somebody who might be going on maternity leave for 2 months. I have somebody else who has whatever the case may be. Maybe they're moving. And let's not forget the availability of the vendor and the business unit folks. So it's starting to look at it through the lens of load leveling. And if I can use the term flatten the curve, I hate using it. We've used it for 2 years. But if I know I got reassessments coming up in April, May, June, July, maybe I could spread some of those out further, or maybe I could start tackling these a month or two in advance. Okay. So it's very important to have those discussions. And if you're wondering, why would he go up there in September and October and do the same thing? It's because many, many large organizations stop all types of processing for their end of the year closing. So you can't make any changes come November. From November 1st through December 31st or January 10th or whatever it is, nothing could be done. Okay, don't bother me. Don't bother the vendors, because they're all focused on end year processing, closing out the quarters, etc. So you want to make sure that you're lining things up and saying, hey, is it okay? We have this assessment coming up late November, early December. I know we're hitting the holidays. Can we still do this, or do we need to move this up? Or If I feel based on previous assessments that the risk is lower, I can actually put this into the first quarter of the following year. So this is about the value that you're bringing back to the business unit, as I mentioned earlier. When you're doing this, the other thing you're able to present too is having your metrics. We talked about metrics earlier. All of this is going to tie into easier identification and creation and delivery of metrics where you could say, look, we have the ability to make these adjustments here, and we will be able to squeeze in these assessments. Business units love when you partner with them. Why always be behind the eight ball? Get yourself in front of that so you can be racking the balls on the table first thing instead of being stuck behind the eight ball. The last thing I'm going to share with you here is when you execute a more proactive footing, the C-level recognizes it. And I'm not just talking C-levels, I'm talking to business VPs, because they go and they talk to the chief operating officer. They talk to the procurement officers, the privacies, and on and on. And I can't tell you how many times that I have heard over the years of the value that we brought back to the business units, because it's the VPs and the senior VPs that have commented on the work that we have done in helping them and assisting them going through and lining up those assessments in advance to really smooth things out. And it also is a welcome to them, because they're able to keep their project management offices abreast of what's coming up too. So they know, you know what, you got me thinking here. We're going to need a 30 to 45 day time frame based on what the assessment guidance is. So let's start lining that up now so we can tackle that. So we're not going to be having our backs against the wall 3 months from now. So having that well-oiled machine is really going to be a big feather in your cap in the long run. Trust me when I tell you that. So let me put this all on one final slide for you. So first one, get out of reactive mode. Start having a proactive footing. Start looking forward to that. Think now, where do I want to be? Where do I need to be? What's going to help me get out of this? I feel like I'm 6 feet in a hole. How can I get out of this hole? Start looking at that. Put some time to yourself and start digging that out. And guess what, folks? You don't have to do this alone. You have a team. Don't forget to talk to your boots on the ground. Work with them. They'll gladly provide you the insight that you need. Work with them. You support them. Believe me, they're going to support you. Establish an official third-party inventory registry. Make sure you have that understanding as to, are we responsible for the total inventory? Is it procurement and sourcing? Is it some other organization? Perhaps by charter, the business units themselves are responsible for that. Now you need, as we talked earlier, you need to be able to set up and make sure that you have those vendors all documented, or some way you can go back and tick and tie your registry and inventory to their registry and inventory. Again, keep and share meaningful metrics. You know, have meaningful metrics. Make sure what you have is, if you have a metric that you don't care about, get rid of it. Why keep tabs of it? Because I'll tell you why. Because if somebody like me as an ex-auditor comes in and says, so describe this metric, we don't keep that metric anymore, then why are you keeping it? Why have something that's not meaningful? Okay, sounds like a low risk item here in the event that you're going through an audit, but these are the things they're going to hit you on. Okay, keep metrics that you only need. Ensure adherence to corporate policies and standards. Always read policy and standards that are coming from the corporate structure. Always read them and see, does any of this apply to my program? And sometimes you might have to read the entire policy because it might not say up front within the first paragraph or so, it's a financial thing, I don't have to worry about it. Well, somewhere down the line, it might say, this is going to affect my program in this way. So you want to start being able to prepare for yourself for that. And lastly, and I don't know how much more I could speak to this, maintain appropriate documentation. It's really going to save you in the long run when you're dealing with an internal audit, or a regulator's coming in to do an assessment on you. So, broke a little bit early here. We were going to save the questions for after Scott's session, but I'm seeing a lot of questions are coming through right now. Would you like to, shall we take some of those questions right now?
Sure, I do have a handful. Let's just do maybe one, and then as people start to think of some more, they can go ahead and do that. My camera on here. A very short and sweet one. How can you get buy-in from your leadership team if they don't see this as a high risk?
Okay, when you're saying when you don't see this as a high risk,
If they don't see this as a high risk.
third party, you're talking about your third party risk management. See, that's where I wish. See, I need a little bit more context when they don't see this as a high risk. Well, if you're in a regulated industry, this is a high risk. All you got to do is take a look at the regulations. I mean, this is front and center for financial services, front and center for healthcare. And guess what, folks? Things that happen in financial services tend to percolate down across multiple industries. You're seeing this obviously a lot in the utilities industry, in the energy sector, where organizations need to identify their critical relationships, their critical suppliers. So it's good to make sure that you have an understanding of what is going on there and making sure that your cadence, your documentation, all of these things that I've mentioned is able to support that. If somebody wants to go in a little bit more depth, I would need more context based around that. At the end of this, I can certainly provide everybody my contact info and they can reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to entertain that question.
Perfect. And then, yeah, it's absolutely encouraged if there are more questions. I know we do have some already, but please feel free to ask so we can, ensure that it's valuable for everybody. And let's look at another question and then I'll throw it over to Scott. How do you define what suppliers go into the supplier inventory and register? You mentioned suppliers paid via credit card. Do you exclude them from your supplier inventory?
No, you should not exclude them from your supplier inventory. There's a reason why, particularly on the financial side, that they say all vendors must be registered. And whether you're reading the EBA outsourcing guidelines, you're reading OCC guidance here, the reason why you need to have that is because you have to be able to trace down to those various levels with respect to where the data is going. It's all about who's in possession of the data. You have to follow the chain, okay, the downstream effect. You have to be able to have, in many cases, data maps, okay? So it's very important that you know, and if you find out that a vendor or even a subcontractor is gaining access to your data and you don't have a record of it, you're going to get hit on that. It's almost like, you give your neighbor your house key. So, they can come in and they could let your dog out when you happen to go out of town and water your plants. And then you find out that, their cousin has access to your house. They gave them, because it turns out that, they had to go out and they said to their cousin, hey, if you happen to be in the neighborhood, can you let Tom's dog out and water his plants? I never gave you permission for that. So we don't have no register of this particular vendor. Let's switch it from a personal basis back to a business basis. I have no registry of who's going to be in possession of that data. So now you have to update your data maps. You have to update your data outflows as to who's going to be in possession of that data. The onus is always on the outsourcer. So that's very important. That's why it's so important to make sure you have an inventory or registry as to who is going to be in possession of the data, who is providing those, that supply or those critical processings for you.
And as a follow-up to that question, they mentioned, so a florist paid via credit card should go into a supplier inventory and be treated as a supplier and go through due diligence, et cetera? No. If you, every Friday night, you decide to go to Dunkin' and buy everybody, no, you're not going to put Dunkin' Donuts through an assessment. No, you're not giving Dunkin'. What are you giving Dunkin' besides money? And saying, oh God, I bought 2 dozen donuts. No, focus on the data, focus on the risk. It's the, now let's go through this. And here's remember folks, you're looking at everything through the risk lens. And don't be afraid to ask the question, what's the risk? What's the risk of me giving a credit card to a florist? Minimal, okay? What's the risk of having your custodial staff on your floor? Should we assess them? Absolutely. Why? Think of what they do when they come on your floor. You think they're just sweeping up the floor, emptying the waste baskets?
No, they're able to go, hey, wait, what's that on the conference room wall? Click. Marketing strategy, networking strategies. What's on your desk? Could be customer information, financial records, growth strategies. So you have to be able to take a look at the exposure risk. We call this exposure, taking a look at what the vendor is going to be exposed to. So Domino's, Dunkin' Donuts, your custodial staff, yes. Because they're going to be on your property and they're going to be able to see this stuff. And that's what's important. So I would expect to see a custodial firm. Your security guards, I would expect them to have their, don't you want to run background checks on them? Are you going to allow the custodial staff and them to walk around with one of these where they can take photos of stuff? Probably not. And a lot of organizations will actually say that, yeah, you could listen to music, but it's got to be like an iPod. Remember those things? I have one little iPod where it's just your music. You download it on, you can walk around and do whatever you want. You just don't have a camera on it. And you don't have the ability to send any files through Wi-Fi or anything. Okay. Good question. Thank you.
Cool.
Popular question too.
Good question so far. Some more are trickling in, but I'll ask you to stop sharing your screen real quick, and I'm going to throw it over to Scott, and he's going to.
And just real quickly, if anybody wants to have any additional follow-up or wants to ask a question directly, certainly, Melissa, they can reach out to me this way. This is probably the easiest way to go.
Yeah, perfect. And I can
thank you.
Put that in the chat as well. Let me throw it over to Scott, and I'll let him chat for a few minutes.
Yeah, okay. Sure thing, Melissa. Let me share my screen with everybody here. Doop. There we go. Go into presentation mode. All right. Quick check, Melissa. Can you see my screen okay?
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, first off, before I get started real quick on just a real quick overview of how Prevalent can help, I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of jonesing for Dunkin' Donuts now. I think Tom mentioned them like 3 times or something, and I'm like, man, a Long John would go pretty well right now. So, donuts on Tom afterward. Okay, so real quick, I wanted to kind of transition into how Prevalent might be able to help your organization as you are thinking more about compliance and addressing some of the, the challenges or risks that you might have in a compliance sense. First off, let me start by saying that when we talk to our customers, they tell us they want to achieve any one or sometimes multiple of these 3 things, and these map perfectly to what Tom just talked about. First is getting the data they need to make better decisions, and that could mean through automating the assessment process, more clearly getting data to demonstrate that you achieve a compliance requirement, aggregating data from multiple inputs and sources of intelligence, cyber and otherwise, compliance or otherwise, to make good decisions and doing it in a meaningful way. Second, increasing team efficiency and breaking down silos. What do I mean by that? Ditching spreadsheets once and for all, knocking down the silos between teams and tools that each provide a little bit of information, but maybe don't provide a complete picture of information. And then third, evolving and scaling that program. And that means making the compliance process much less painful, finding and getting information, building an audit trail of evidence from third parties and being able to map it and account for it when it comes time for that audit to happen. So those 3 things is what we see customers tell us repeatedly they want to accomplish with their third-party risk management programs. So, our approach to addressing third-party risk management challenges is not kind of a one and done process where you collect some information, run a report, identify some risks, and then, meet with an audit, check the process off. We look at third-party risk holistically from a lifecycle-based approach, from the point at which you source and select a new vendor and the unique risks that you're exposed to at that time, all the way through the point where you offboard and terminate a vendor relationship as well. And this approach is applicable not just to IT security and risk management contacts responsible for doing a lot of the security and data privacy assessment work, but also data privacy, legal and compliance teams that need to have some visibility into OFAC violations, ABAC or ESG policies. And then importantly, procurement, vendor, supplier management teams as well that need to know that, at the beginning of a relationship, you're initiating a relationship or contracting with a company that has the right security, privacy, ESG, and operational policies in place to kind of match what your company's targets are. And we see these unique challenges across each of these, stages of the life cycle. Not really having really good risk insights or manual processes when you're looking at vendors. We help address that challenge by giving you some automation, some prescription, some intelligence, and adding that to your RFX processes so you can match up their compliance, profile versus, what your target profile is, your target risk profile. From a second stage intake and onboarding perspective, we see companies challenged with different teams, processes, and tools. And what we do is we help you create a single source of the truth, a single source of supplier risk profiles, intake processes, contracting and onboarding workflows to simplify the process for everybody involved. Third, and this kind of speaks to Tom's second point or second recommendation of needing good third-party inventory registry, good insights. We not only help you consolidate your vendors, suppliers, third parties, whatever, to a single source of the truth, but we give you the capability to score them on their inherent risks. So a few moments ago, we talked about, the Dunkin' Donuts. There we go again. Dunkin' Donuts or a floral provider, whatever. With Prevalent, you can execute a inherent risk assessment that is, very comprehensive and automatically tier and profile all of the vendors and folks you do business with on a regular basis so that you know how to prescribe the next step in the due diligence process. And that is all automated all through our platform. Then when it comes to assess and remediate, to conduct, proper, regular due diligence, customers tell us they're kind of burdened with spreadsheets and manual processes to make it happen. We streamline that process by giving you access to, I think, 200 different assessment templates in the platform now for everything from IT security and privacy to ESG, ABAC, and all these kind of different domain areas, and then kind of mold that into a single risk register for every vendor so that you can kind of scale and understand where those challenges are. Next up, to monitor and validate also, and that means getting some good visibility and some regular visibility into cyber, business, reputational, financial insights, and then conjoining those findings with your assessment findings to kind of validate whether or not those controls are effective. Measuring SLAs and performance, extracting key contract details and then measuring adherence to that. And then finally, offboarding and terminating, kind of overcoming the manual process and checklist-based approach to making sure that everybody has the access cut off and that all the right compliance and documentation is in place. Again, our approach is to help you simplify and speed up onboarding with a single source of the truth, streamline the process and ongoing management of your vendors by closing gaps in risk coverage, and then get your teams all singing from the same hymnal from a third-party vendor and supplier perspective. And that, by its very nature, simplifies the compliance assessment process, documentation management process, and then reporting perspective as well. We do this across multiple different risk domain areas in our platform. We've just simply created these 6 buckets to try and enumerate a good portion of those. You can kind of see where we really focus in either executing assessments to your third-party vendors and suppliers, or delivering you insights via continuous monitoring in many of these areas. We deliver our solution set through a combination of people, data, and platform. And by that, I mean we employ third-party risk management experts that do the hard work for you if you choose to outsource it to us. Managed Services does the onboarding, assessment, remediation, and management. We give you an unparalleled number of insights and intelligence in the platform. And we've done the pre-integration work for you, so you don't have to get an ESG tool or a D&B or a financial tool or Refinitiv or one of these tools that give you, siloed data insights. We already pulled it together for you. So, you get it consolidated in the platform. Speaking of the platform, one place to execute workflow, reporting, and management of that third party. at the end of the day, we're hoping to help you accomplish three things: to help your organization be smarter in how it executes third-party risk management, give you data-driven analytics, role-based reporting to circulate throughout your enterprise to all the stakeholders. Second, to unify processes, tools, and teams under a single version of the truth, from onboarding to offboarding, and then finally be very prescriptive in how we define intelligence, remediation recommendations, and more, so that you can really close the loop on that process and simplify, third-party risk management, not just for compliance to address those challenges, but also from a vendor management and just good operational hygiene perspective as well. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share from the perspective of kind of how Prevalent helps here. Melissa, I'll turn it back over to you. You can open it up for questions for Tom.
Perfect. Thank you, Scott. Now would be a really good time for you to drop in any more questions that you have. Don't be shy. You can always do it, anonymously. If you're, a little shy, it's fine. But please answer this last poll question for us. I'm curious to know if you're looking to establish or augment a third-party risk program, let's say within this year. Maybe you're still stuck in spreadsheet jail, and please be honest. We really do follow up with you, and I have a few questions, and maybe Tom can wrap things up and then I'll close us out. But a question just came in. Any thoughts on the new guidance?
Yeah, great question there, Melissa. I'm going through it. It's from what I've read right now, I have to give kudos to the regulators. If you gotta, it's 63 pages long, but when you start going through it, you realize the first half of it is about all of the way they've got the responses back from those who contributed to it. And, the thing with the regulators is, they're trying to find a balance where they're making it prescriptive, but they're not trying to give you the answers. So what regulators really want you to do is they want you to think of this stuff. They want you to be able to address things from your risk tolerance. Every organization has a different risk tolerance. You have to make sure that when you're doing third-party risk and you're doing your assessments, et cetera, you could have two banks with the same asset classes, but one might have a more conservative viewpoint to investing and doing technology and things, another one being much more liberal with respect to what they want to do. And so the liberal ones will be taking on more risk. So they're doing it on a case-by-case basis. The big point out of the guidance is a lot of the banks and financial organizations have kind of collectively griped that you might have one regulator coming from the OCC that says you're an A, and then 3 months later you have a Fed regulator coming in going, you guys are a C, and they're going, wait a minute, the OCC was just here and they looked at everything you did. So what they're doing is they're trying to help the regulators so the regulators are singing from the same playbook with respect to how they should go in and apply third-party risk management concepts and risk strategies to a banking entity. So whether a regulator is coming from the OCC, whether they're coming from the Federal Reserve, FDIC, whoever it is, that they're able to come in and they're going to grade your paper. They're going to grade your work the same way. I'm working on a LinkedIn article that's going to be talking a little bit about some of the things that I see out there. Some things I found, some of the wording I had to go back and read 3 or 4 times to make sure that, is this what I think they're saying here? Is this how I'm interpreting this? So, a lot of people that like to post things out, it's like new guidance from the FDIC. Okay, so a couple of people have posted what their thoughts are on it. I'm going to be doing the same. I'm still trying. I like to read. I like to digest what I'm reading and not just throw stuff out there. So keep your eyes open. I will have something out there on LinkedIn with respect to this. And shameless plug, when I release my latest TPRM tidbit on Monday, I'll probably be talking something about this as well. But there's a lot to go in and look at and digest. So stay tuned.
You're here just for the followers, huh?
Yeah. Hey, Melissa, if I could jump in real quick, we actually have posted and published quite a bit on the new interagency guidance. We've got a compliance checklist white paper that we've published. We've got a blog on it. We've got a webpage dedicated to kind of what the challenge is and what some of the best practices you should be looking forward to. So, I do encourage everybody to go check that out.
Thanks for pointing that out, Scott. Sorry, I was tied up and I was not aware of that. So my apologies.
No worries. We hide it from you.
There's a settings, actually, we could just hide from Tom, just keep you on your toes. But any other thoughts, before I kind of close this out, Tom or Scott?
Now, if I may just close, again, I think the most out of the top 5 there, please focus on number 1. It's really going to save you headaches on the back end. Be proactive. Take a look at your documentation. Take a look at your business relationships and partnerships. Focus on, you get people like to focus on their strengths. Focus and take a look at your weak spots. Who can help you close that gap if you find a weak spot? This is going to, again, these are feathers in your cap, particularly if you have to, if somebody comes in and happens to be reviewing your program.
Perfect. Scott, anything?
Nothing else from me, Melissa. Thank you.
You don't want the LinkedIn followers, I see.
Well, unless they're offering donuts in return.
And don't forget,
give me
Tom,
your address, Scott. I'm going to make my way out to Columbus.
He will take you up on that, I'm sure. Well, I guess I'll, put a period at the end of the sentence. Thank you so much, Tom, for your time again. And Scott, of course. Thank you. And everyone, I love the questions you asked. And I did drop Tom's email in the chat too, in case you have any questions that pop in your mind at a later time. Follow him on LinkedIn. And lastly, I hope to see you, at least a handful of you, in your inboxes and maybe at a future webinar. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.